Mr. Speaker, we have a Prime Minister who is involved in political interference in our justice system. A Prime Minister who's denied the truth. A Prime Minister who's tried to intimidate people. A Prime Minister who's tried to silence everyone who has a different viewpoint than him. If this Prime Minister has even a little bit of courage, just a little bit, then will he agree to act on his threat of legal action and commence proceedings so that we can finally know the truth about this issue? Or is he just afraid of testifying under oath? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, we know that Canadians need to hear the truth, and that is exactly why the Prime Minister had the courage to ensure that he would waive cabinet confidence and solicitor-client privilege. That's why Canadians were able to hear the truth. And yes, Mr. Speaker, we sent a letter to the Leader of the Opposition. We put him on notice because he is continuing to say things that should not be said. And that is exactly why he retracted his tweets. The Honourable Member for Richmond Athabasca. Order. Mr. Speaker, for 4 days, we've been in this House asking this question to the Prime Minister. We want to know if he will act on his threat of legal action. We've asking again and again, but he hasn't changed his version. Every day he says the same thing. Our leader has repeated what he said before, and all the Prime Minister is doing is engaging in intimidation and trying to silence people who think differently than him. Will he have the courage to act on his threat of legal action so that we can finally hear the whole truth? Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians need to hear the truth. That is exactly why all facts are now public. And, Mr. Speaker, we've taken the first step in this process. That's why we sent a letter to the Leader of the Opposition. He continues to make false and misleading statements to Canadians. After he received the notice, he changed the words that he used. He deleted his tweets and online statements. He has already responded with his action.
Honourable Member for Chilliwack Hope.
When the Prime Minister threatened to sue the Leader of the Opposition for daring to criticize his actions on the Liberal SNC-Lavalin scandal, he thought he could pressure the Conservative leader into backing down. Instead, the Conservative leader continues to state, inside and outside of the House, that the Prime Minister inappropriately interfered in an ongoing criminal proceeding and then conspired to cover it up. If the Prime Minister actually believes he has a case, when will we see him in court?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Official Opposition was put on notice, and after he received that notice, the Leader of the Official Opposition quickly deleted tweets from online. He changed the words that he has been using. So even though they talk a big game, they say that there's been no effects of this notice that was provided to them. We have already seen that they have deleted tweets, but Mr. Speaker, this was not the first time they did this. After the Minister of Innovation had put the Leader of the Official Opposition on notice, he had retracted his comments at that time and deleted those tweets as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Chilliwack Hope.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is threatening to sue the Conservative leader for stating that the former Attorney General told the Prime Minister that she was feeling inappropriate political pressure from him. The only problem with that strategy is that the Prime Minister has now admitted that the former Attorney General did warn him about his inappropriate political pressure to his face and in person. So the Prime Minister is threatening to sue for something he now says is true. Yes. Threatening to sue is weak sauce if you don't back it up. So when will we see him in court?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives' only plan is to mislead Canadians. Yes. And that's exactly why when they did it earlier this year, the Minister of Innovation had put the Leader of the Official Opposition on notice. The Leader of the Official Opposition retracted those comments, deleted those tweets. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives once again continue to mislead Canadians. So the Prime Minister put the Leader of the Official Opposition on notice. What did the Leader of the Official Opposition do on March 31st? He deleted those tweets. The only plan Conservatives is to mislead Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Chilliwack Hope. Order.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have put the Conservative leader on notice. He's repeated the exact same statement outside of this House, and now he's calling on the Prime Minister to take further action, come before a court, go on the stand. If he has nothing to hide, if he stands by everything in his threatening letter to sue the Leader of the Opposition, I ask again, when will we see him in court?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, the Leader of the Official Opposition was put on notice. And after he received notice, Mr. Speaker, he deleted those tweets. He and his team, they went back probably to their office. They revisited some wording. With their new wording is exactly what they are repeating. They will not repeat the comments that they deleted after they received notice. That is a fact. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
According to Maclean's, the Ethics Commissioner has become a useful fig leaf for Liberals keen to shut down further discussions. Harper Conservatives drafted a weak ethics bill, but it's Liberals using it as cover to avoid answering questions. Liberals will be under the microscope when the anti-bribery groups meet in June. Will the Prime Minister assure OECD officials that Liberals will not interfere with Canada's top prosecutor taking corporate corruption to court?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I would encourage that member to revisit his wording because I know he would never undermine the work of officers of Parliament. And if all of a sudden the NDP is taking that approach, they are even closer to the Conservatives than I even realized. We will never undermine the work of officers of Parliament. When it comes to the conflict of interest and ethics commissioner, yes, there is an ongoing investigation in this matter. Yes, we have confidence in our institutions. We know that there is an ongoing court case. We know that the Justice Committee did their important work. We, I guess, only on this side have respect for our institutions. Thank you.
Order. I'm having great trouble hearing the answer. Order. Well, we all want to hear the question and the answer, of course.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. Canadians are concerned. They see this Prime Minister ignoring questions about the scandal, and they want to know what happened. And they're not the only ones concerned. The OECD has warned Canada that they are watching how the Liberal government is handling this entire affair. People want the truth. When will the Prime Minister launch a public inquiry?
Bravo.
Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, in March, the Minister spoke with the chair of the OECD Working Group, and it was confirmed that we are going to be fully cooperating with the OECD's work, and that we fully support their work. Canada is a fervent defender of the international order and a rules-based international order. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. It's increasingly clear that this Prime Minister defends big companies rather than ordinary people. Last year, people were horrified to learn that the big banks were aggressively pushing sales of products that people didn't need. But we've learned that the situation was worse, and that the Liberal government actually watered down the report on the subject. Worse, they gave the opportunity to the big banks to sugarcoat it even further. When will the Prime Minister admit that he is there to help rich companies rather than ordinary people?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman has drawn the wrong conclusion. As a matter of fact, as a result of the report, we have introduced legislation which prohibits the banks from providing misleading information, prohibits the banks from exerting undue pressure, requires the banks to have a policy in place to make consumers receive the products that are appropriate to them, and increases the penalties on the banks from $500,000 to $10 million.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Since we launched our Lower Cell Phone Bill campaign, we have been swamped from stories of mistreated Canadians. Now we learn the agency tasked with protecting Canadians from the banks changed their report on aggressive sales tactics because the banks asked. Even a requirement that banks work in the best interest of consumers was removed. Experts say this shows a cozy relationship between banks, the agency, and the Liberal government. Why is this government supporting billionaire banks and not Canadians?
Here. Public safety.
Mr. Speaker, in both official languages, he's still wrong. As a result of the work investigating this situation, the government introduced legislation that prohibits the banks from providing misleading information. It prohibits the banks from exerting undue pressure. It requires the banks to have policies in place to make sure consumers receive the products that are appropriate to them, and it increases the penalties on the banks from $500,000 to $10 million. Parliament decides.
The honourable member for Lethbridge.
The Prime Minister was accused of strong-arming the former Attorney General to interfere in a criminal prosecution. He denied it. She provided proof. Then the Prime Minister was accused of firing her for refusing to interfere. Again, he denied it. Again, she provided proof. The Prime Minister was accused of being aware that the former Attorney General raised her concerns with the officials at the PMO. He denied it, and again, she provided proof. Does the Prime Minister realize that if he repeats these denials in the court of law, he will be charged with perjury?
Hear, hear.
The honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, all of the facts on this matter are public, and they're public because the Prime Minister provided an unprecedented waiver. He waived solicitor-client privilege as well as cabinet confidence so that Canadians can decide for themselves. And I know the Conservatives believe that they have to decide for all Canadians. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives will continue to represent Conservatives. The Conservatives will continue to focus on us. We will focus on all Canadians. And that's exactly why Canada is better off today than it was under 10 years of Stephen Harper. But, Mr. Speaker, we have a lot more work to do, and I encourage us to start talking about policy that matters.
Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Mr. Speaker, she's right. Canadians do know the facts. The Prime Minister said the Globe and Mail allegations of pressure on the Attorney General were false. We now know that's not true. He said the former Attorney General never came to him to speak of her concerns. We now know that's not true. He said it was all about protecting jobs, but we know now that's also not true. Does the Prime Minister realize that if he repeats these falsehoods in court, he will be charged with perjury?
Government House Leader.
Perhaps I can help honourable members out. Mr. Speaker, Conservatives said that the Justice Committee will not meet. That turned out to be false. Conservatives said that witnesses won't get to appear. That turned out to be false. Conservatives said that the Prime Minister won't waive solicitor-client privilege or cabinet confidence. That turned out to be false. All facts are public for Canadians to hear. Canadians deserve to get to hear the truth, and that's exactly why all matters from Justice Committee on this issue were in public. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, on February 7th, the Prime Minister said that this whole story and everything that the former Attorney General said was false. But today, Canadians, the media, and worse, the entire Liberal caucus knows the truth. Does the Prime Minister realize that he would be guilty of perjury if he said the same things in court?
The
Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time that the Conservative leader and his party have misled Canadians with false and defamatory statements. And, Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time that we had to send a letter to put the official opposition leader on notice, because he continues to say false things. In December, in February, and now in March, they retracted and deleted statements and tweets because they realized they had to have at least a little bit of respect. Maybe not a lot, but a little bit of respect for our institutions. Thank you. The honourable member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, I would remind the Government House Leader that the letter of notice sent to the opposition leader has to do with a statement on March 29th, and that absolutely nothing was changed in that statement. And in fact, the opposition leader reaffirmed his statement publicly before the media. But the Prime Minister says things that aren't true. So is he ready to come to the court to say them again, knowing that he'll be perjured? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, on a number of occasions now, the leader of the opposition, the Conservative leader, has been forced to delete tweets and change the words that he used in his statements. He changed the words that he's used, and now he is repeating the words that he previously changed. But the facts are clear. After the opposition leader received a letter from the Prime Minister and from the Minister of Innovation, he deleted his tweets and he changed the words that he was using because he knows very well that we could take action against him.
For Lakeland. Order.
Sir, the Prime Minister's letter was about the opposition leader's statement. It has nothing to do with tweets. And the Prime Minister said over and over that no one ever warned him that his pressure to interfere in the criminal prosecution of SNC-Lavalin was political interference and was wrong. But last week, he himself admitted that on September 17th, the former Attorney General directly advised him in person to back off. And so now, even though he caught himself in his own words, he still threatens to sue the leader of the opposition. Does the Prime Minister know that if he repeats his initial denials in court, he will commit perjury?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, the first step in any situation, as they are referring to, is to put the leader of the official opposition on notice. And Mr. Speaker, we have now put the leader of the official opposition on notice on numerous times. Canadians can rest assured that we will not stand idly by while these conservatives continue to mislead Canadians, and that's exactly, we provided them notice. And what did the leader of the official opposition do? He deleted tweets, he retracted online statements, because he knows very well that the notice he was served has consequences. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I want to remind the Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier and other members that each party and each member needs to wait their turn to speak. Now it is up to the Honourable Member for Lakeland.
The opposition leader didn't retract any statements, and in fact, he repeated every single word yesterday. And Conservatives, we look forward to the Prime Minister testifying in court under oath, where he can't control the process, he can't control the people, and he can't shut it down like he killed 2 investigations. And for once in his life, he'll have to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So does he actually have the backbone to set a date? And when will we see him in court?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
That question now on numerous occasions. They know very well that the leader of the official opposition was put on notice. They know very well that he has deleted tweets and retracted comments. But what do they do, Mr. Speaker? They continue to mislead Canadians. And they mislead Canadians, Mr. Speaker, because they have no plan for the environment. They have no plan for the economy. But what they do have, they have a plan to mislead Canadians. And that's exactly why when it comes to programs and services available to Canadians, they choose to mislead Canadians by refusing to admit that there is a climate action incentive. Luckily, they cannot do that in New Brunswick, but they sure did.
Member for Essex.
As much as this Prime Minister wants to change the channel, Canadians still want the truth on his political interference in the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin. The Prime Minister says that he has full confidence in committees. You know, the same ones that Liberals have shut down debate on. Well, the OECD isn't letting it go, and that's why they referred the case to their working group on bribery. The Prime Minister's word isn't going to cut it. This is a stain on Canada's international reputation. Will the Prime Minister save us the embarrassment and launch a public, independent inquiry?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Canada-U.S. Relations.
The Minister spoke with the chair of the OECD working group. She confirmed to him that we are committed to fully cooperating with the work of the OECD and that we fully support their good work. Canada is a strong supporter of the OECD and the rules-based international order. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Timmins James Bay. Order.
So my mom calls me and she says, did the Prime Minister really give $12 million to Galen Weston to fix his fringes instead of seniors, that they give it to a company that cheats families out of bread? Now that's my mom. She's a miner's daughter. She grew up in a different middle class than the Prime Minister. So I say, but Mom, it's about lobbying. It's about who you know in the PMO. So will the Prime Minister explain why 2 Loblaws lobbyists attended an exclusive cash for access event with him and senior staff of the Minister of Environment? Can they explain that to my mom?
chance to do so. Order. I'm sure the honourable member who asked the question wants to hear the answer. I trust other members will let that happen. Order. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, any serious climate plan is going to involve investments in energy efficiency. The project in question involves a $36 million investment from the company that's going to allow them to replace fridges in over 370 stores, which will have the equivalent impact of taking 50,000 cars off the road. This decision was based on science, facts, and evidence, and the advice of our department. With respect to the honourable member's mother, I'd be happy to point her to the investments in Budget 2019 that will help make homes more efficient, that will save her money, and do the right thing by the environment.
The honourable member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.